So now that we have the general scene set up, let's go ahead and add a little bit of pizzazz to these crystals and then make sure that they draw the attention of the player. So the first thing that we're going to do to draw that attention is we'll select one of those crystals and we're going to right click to add an FSM in the Playmaker window. So this FSM, this is just going to be called our rotator. And that first state is just going to be called rotate. So to rotate this crystal, I'll double click in my state window and we're going to bring up the, let me go ahead and just type in rotate here. And underneath the iTween section, just because this is a very simple animation, we don't need to animate this ourselves. We're going to use the iTween rotate by action. So I'll double click that to add it. And let me look at my options here and configure this. So the game object I want to rotate is the owner that has the FSM. The vector that we need to rotate it in, so let me check, let me hit E to bring up my manipulator, and I'm going to make sure that I'm in local space. So we want to rotate this guy in the around the y-axis. So let me go ahead and I'll click in the vector and I'll give it a positive y to denote that that's where we want to rotate it. And instead of using the time, actually I want to use the speed. So let me go ahead and click the use variable here and I will type in a speed number. So let's just try 30. Ease type, we want that to be continuous, so we don't want to use an ease type. The loop, we will set that to loop, and the space it's going to rotate in is in self space. Okay, so let's go ahead and give that a shot in play mode and see if that works. All right, so we do have rotation. All right, nice and subtle. Definitely draws the attention a little bit better. Maybe we can increase that ever so slightly. Let's try to go to 45. All right, not bad. So now we're drawing attention. Second step is to actually create some interactivity on this guy. So I think the way that I want to set this up is instead of just running over the crystal and collecting it automatically, I want to create a little bit of an interaction. So I want to be looking at this crystal and I want to do a click to collect the crystal. So to enable, let's see, let me shrink that up. So to collect it, I'm going to add another Playmaker component on this. So I'm going to click into where it says rotator in my Playmaker window and select add another FSM. So this FSM, I will name collection. And we're going to do a mouse pick event to denote when the player is looking at the game object. So I'm going to have two states that I need to transition in and out of. And the first state is going to be not looking at. And of course, the opposite will be state 2, which is looking at. So for that first event, I'm just going to do a right click and I will add a transition and I'll just go ahead and add a finished. I'll do that to my looking at state as well. And those two finished states will just transition from one state into the next. So I can go in and out of these states. So the action that's going to take me in and out of these states is going to be our mouse pick. Mouse pick event. Let me go ahead and double click on that to add it to my first state. So the game object we're going to be looking at is the owner, is the game object itself. And just in general, the way that the mouse pick works is it's going to be firing out a raycast from the camera to the mouse on the screen, and whatever object it hits traveling in that direction, we can go ahead and test against that, or we can send events based on whatever that raycast hits. So because this is controlled by the direction and position of our mouse, we need to define what happens when certain events happen with that mouse. And in particular, what we're going to do is to transition into our second state, use that mouse over. So once the mouse is over the object, we'll send the finished event. And going back the other direction, I need to use the same action, so I'll just go ahead and Control C the mouse pick event in the first state, and Control V paste it into that second event. So instead of moused over for the second event, we're going to go ahead and reset that, and to transition us out of the second state, we want to use a mouse off. So we'll say finished, use the finished event for that. And what the logic represents is just, well, we're looking at the object, we'll be in this state, or excuse me, when we're not, we'll be in this state, and when we are looking at it, we'll be in the second state, and that's all controlled by mouse pick. So let's just go ahead and play and give that a test. And I need to make sure that this is not on maximize play, so let me go ahead and hit escape to free my mouse, and we'll leave maximize screen mode. Okay, so I'm going to click back into my scene, and if I mouse over the object, what we should see is we should be transitioning states. This is not working, and the reason that it's not working is because, well, there it is. We've gotten a warning from Playmaker, and we need a collider on the object, and we don't have this. So let's go ahead and just quickly add that to the object, add component, and we'll do I'll use a mesh collider for this because I want this to be a little bit more exact. Okay, now it has a mesh collider. Now let's give it another shot. And again, let me go ahead and make sure that my maximize on play is turned off. There we go. So now we can look at the FSM at the same time. All right, so we're moused off the object, and when we mouse on it, there we go, we're going into the next state. And if I mouse off, we're going to transition back into the first state. There we go, perfect. Okay, so our mouse pick is working. We know when we're looking at the object. We just want to give that feedback to the player, because right now nothing is actually changing when we're looking at the object. Not to the player anyway. So what I like to do to make sure that the player notices that that change has occurred is we need to change the material on the object when we're looking at it. So that's going to be in the second state. And I'm going to use a set material action. So I will double click there to add it, and it's going to ask us what material we want to use when we're looking at that guy. So right now the default is this crystal red. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this and rename this crystal red mouse. And I'm going to go ahead and boost up this emission, so it's going to get brighter when we're looking at it. So let me go ahead and just dial up this current brightness. And actually, that might have done it. Let me assign this before I start dialing this up. So I'm going to drag and drop it onto the material. Did it work? Crystal red mouse. There we go. So actually it looks pretty similar, even though I've increased the emission. Just because I don't have the glow effect enabled, I might not catch that as a player. So let me go ahead and slide this a little bit more towards the white spectrum. There we go. So that'll be our red crystal mouse. I'm going to select the crystal FSM, and I'm going to go ahead and plug that crystal red masked into the set material. If I transition out of our looking at state into the not looking at, it's still going to keep that material. So we actually need to transition back to that default material. So I'm going to do a copy on the set material action, Control C. I'm going to paste that back into my first state. And that first state, I want to reset the material to the default, which is our crystal red, like that. And just in our scene view here, I'll go ahead and reapply the crystal red. All right, so let's go ahead and hit play and just test that and make sure it works. So that material change, that's all just a bit of feedback to our player. So they know that they're looking at the game object, and that works just fine. So I'm going to go ahead and, while I'm at it, I'm going to go ahead and do that to my blue and yellow crystal also. Okay. So that crystal yellow mask, just going to drive that to be a little bit more white. And we're going to plug all these guys in later. A little bit more white like that. There we go. We're just going to run through this on the red crystal first, and then we'll just go ahead and copy and paste our FSMs onto these other crystals.